The Cannibal Saints. Sergeant Vic walked in a single file line with what remained of his platoon. Mud swallowed their boots with every exhausted step. Rusted shackles bit into wrists, rubbed raw and bleeding. Chains clinked softly beneath the distant thunder of artillery. The sky above the trenches was the color of old bruises, swollen with ash clouds and smoke. No stars had been seen in months. Nobody spoke. Nobody prayed anymore. The enemy marched beside them in silence. They had once been human. Vic could still see fragments of it. A jawline beneath stretched gray skin. Human fingers fused into claw appendages. Torn military coats stitched into robes of flayed flesh. Their helmets had been hammered directly into the skulls with rusted nails. Blackened veins pulsed beneath their skin like worms moving through mud. The damned. Traitors who had sold their souls to the unholy powers beneath the trenches. Some whispered that they had once belonged to the Ninth Crusade before vanishing into the deep tunnels years ago. Others said they were born from starving soldiers who ate human flesh during the long siege and were cursed for eternity. Vic no longer cared which story was true. All he knew was that they had slaughtered 80 men in less than 10 minutes. Now only 12 prisoners remained. A heavy chain linked them together. Private Ellis stumbled ahead of Vic, barely conscious from blood loss. The young man's left cheek hung open to the teeth where shrapnel had torn through him during the ambush. "Keep moving," hissed one of the damned. The creature jabbed Ellis with the bayonet made from sharpened bone. Ellis cried out and fell into the mud. The column stopped. The damned surrounding them turned their heads in perfect unison. Vic immediately knew what was about to happen. "No," whispered Corporal Reed beside him. The creature crouched over Ellis slowly. Its breathing sounded wet. It grabbed Ellis by the hair and forced his face upward. The young private's eyes searched desperately for Vic. "Sergeant!" Vic pulled against the chains instinctively. The rifle butt slammed into his spine hard enough to knock the breath from him. Ellis only screamed once. The damned tore his throat out with its teeth. It didn't use a knife or a blade. It used its own damn teeth. Blood sprayed across the trench wall while the others watched silently. Ellis convulsed in the mud, boots kicking weakly. Then another creature approached, carrying a rusted cleaver. Without ceremony, it hacked off Ellis's legs at the knees. The smell hit moments later. Fresh blood, hot organs, and cooked meat. Vic realized There were fires burning further ahead in the trench line. The creatures had already begun preparing the body before Ellis had even stopped twitching. One of the prisoners vomited. Another began crying softly. The dam simply resumed marching. Ellis's remains were dragged behind them like butchered livestock. The trenches grew deeper the further they descended. Wooden supports disappeared entirely, replaced by walls of compacted corpses frozen into the earth itself. Human arms protruded from the mud like roots from a diseased tree. Faces stared from the trench walls with mouths permanently open in forever silent screams. Some were still alive. Vic saw blinking eyes buried beneath layers of dirt. One soldier, trapped chest deep in a wall, whispered endlessly, "Please kill me. Please kill me." Nobody answered him. The air became warmer, not naturally warm, a breathing warm, like the earth itself inhaled around them. Eventually the trench opened into something massive. Vic froze. This was the enemy headquarters. It stretched across a colossal underground cavern beneath the battlefield. Thousands of candles illuminated towering cathedrals made from artillery wreckage, bones, and crucified bodies. Chains hung from the ceiling, carrying skinned corpses that slowly dripped blood into massive iron basins below. The entire cavern moved with activity. The damned marched in endless processions, carrying prisoners, amputees, and sacks of human remains. Vic saw children among them. Oh my God, there were children. Huge furnaces roared across the cavern floor, where bodies were burned by the dozens. But not all were burned. Some were carved apart carefully, prepared, cooked, and consumed. Long banquet tables stretched through the center of the cathedral, where the damned feasted openly on human flesh. Their faces twitched with ecstasy as they devoured roasted limbs and organs from silver platters. A choir echoed through the cavern, not singing. It was a screaming choir. Hundreds of mutilated prisoners suspended in cages overhead had their lungs punctured with metal tubes. Every agonized breath created horrific notes that blended into one endless song. Reed fell to his knees. "Oh God." "No," muttered Vic. There's no God here." One of the creatures overheard him. It smiled. Its mouth split impossibly wide. "Correct." The prisoners were thrown into iron cages near the center of the cavern. Vic counted. Only 11 now. Hours passed, or days. Time no longer existed underground. The prisoners watched the rituals unfold around them endlessly. The sacrifices always began the same way. A bell rang 3 times. Prisoners were dragged screaming towards a black altar at the center of the cathedral. Priests of the damned stood waiting in robes sewn from human faces. They never killed victims immediately. That would have been mercy. Instead, they carved symbols into flesh while chanting in dead languages. The victims remained alive throughout most of it. Vic watched one man survive nearly 40 minutes after being disemboweled. Something answered the prayers eventually. The candles dimmed, the air trembled, and from somewhere deep beneath the earth, something breathed back. Every time it happened, the damned collapsed in euphoric worship. Then came the feast. The sacrifice were butchered and distributed among the congregation. Nothing was wasted. Nothing. Vic's men broke slowly. Private Nolan lost his mind first. "They're not human," he whispered repeatedly, over and over. "They're not human." When the guards came for him, Nolan didn't even resist. Vic watched them drag the young man towards the altar. Nolan turned once before disappearing into the crowd. "Sergeant!" Vic never saw him again. But later that night, he smelled the cooked meat. Corporal Reed tried escaping on the 3rd day. Vic almost admired him for trying. The guards had entered their cage to remove another prisoner when Reed lunged forward and stole a bone knife from one of them. He stabbed the creature 3 times in the neck. Black blood sprayed everywhere. For one glorious second, hope returned. Then the wounded creature began laughing. The slit throat opened wider and wider until its entire neck split apart vertically. Inside was not flesh or bone, just writhing worms packed together like living organs. They burst outward onto Reed's face. Reed screamed as the worms forced themselves into his mouth and eyes. The other guards held him down while the creatures burrowed beneath his skin. Vic and the others could only watch helplessly. By morning, Reed was alive. Technically, he sat motionless in the corner of the cage, with worms visibly moving beneath his skin. His eyes had turned completely black. Then Reed looked at Vic and smiled. The same impossible smile the creatures wore. That afternoon, Reed unlocked the cage from the outside, not to free them, to drag out the next sacrifice. Private Hell fought harder than any of them. He screamed for his mother while 6 guards restrained him. Vic would hear those screams in his dreams forever. On the 6th day, Vic met the thing ruling the cathedral. They came for him alone. 2 massive, damned, dragged him in chains towards the deepest chamber beneath the cathedral. The lower tunnels were hot enough to blister skin. The walls pulsed like living tissue. Vic realized with horror that the tunnels were organic. The fortress itself was alive. At the chamber's center sat a throne made from fused human skeletons. Something enormous rested upon it. At first, Vic thought it was a corpse. Then it moved. The creature wore the remains of a crusader general's uniform, stretched across its bloated frame. Metals rusted into folds of rotten flesh. Multiple human arms protruded from its torso, like tumors. Its face. Dear God, its face. The face was still human enough to understand emotion, and it was smiling. Sergeant Vic, it said gently. Its voice contained dozens of others whispering beneath it. We have watched you. Vic said nothing. You fought bravely as Saint Cornith. The creature leaned forward. You buried your own, wounded when supplies ran dry. Vic's stomach turned cold. How the hell do you know that? We know all suffering here. The thing gestured around the chamber. This war feeds us. Vic noticed then that dozens of human hearts hung from chains above the throne, still beating, still alive. You were abandoned by your commanders, the creature continued softly. No reinforcements came. No rescue followed. Your God ignored every prayer. Its smile widened. And now your men die screaming beneath the earth. Vic pulled against the chains violently. Kill me now, you God-forsaken creature. Oh, we will, in due time, Sergeant. The creature's many eyes opened across its body. But first, one skeletal arm pointed behind him. Vic turned. His remaining soldiers were being dragged into the chamber. Barely recognizable from starvation and torture, the creature spoke calmly. You, Sergeant, you will watch. The executions lasted hours. Private Samuel went first. They peeled the skin from his arms while keeping him alive with injections made from black fluid. Samuel begged Vic to kill him. Vic couldn't even move. The guards held his head down and forced his eyes open. You will witness, they whispered. Samuel finally died after one of the priests removed his jaw entirely. Then came Jacobs, youngest in the platoon, 17. He cried the entire time, not from pain, but from fear. I don't want to die. Vic broke then. He screamed until his throat bled. He begged, pleaded, promised anything just to make it stop. The creatures only laughed. Jacobs died looking directly at Vic. The last was Lieutenant Graves. Even dying, the officer tried maintaining his composure. Vic, don't give them your soul. Don't let these bastards take anything. Those were his final words before they cut him open. Vic watched his platoon disappear, piece by piece, into cooking fires afterward. The smell filled the chamber. Roasted meat, burning fat. The damned feasted while blood ran through channels in the floor like rivers. The creature upon the throne watched Vic carefully, waiting for him to break completely. And eventually, Vic broke. Days later, Sergeant Vic walked through the cathedral once more. He wasn't chained anymore. No resistance. The damned moved aside respectfully as he passed. His old uniform hung in tatters across his thin frame. Symbols had been carved into his chest. One eye had been removed entirely. In his hands, he carried a rusted bowl filled with cooked flesh, human flesh. Behind him marched new prisoners from the surface. Fresh soldiers, terrified boys covered in mud and ash. One of them looked at Vic desperately. Please help us. Vic stopped. For one horrible moment, something human flickered behind his remaining eye. A memory. Ellis laughing beside a fire. Reed sharing cigarettes. Jacobs lying about his age to enlist. All gone now. Buried beneath screams and darkness. The cathedral breathed around him. The gods beneath the trenches whispered hungrily. Vic looked at the prisoners, then slowly smiled. An impossible smile stretching too wide across his face. The feast is waiting, he said softly. And the trenches swallowed the screams once more.